The stage is now set for the big political showdowns in the November general election. Ahead on Face the State. Today we're focusing on the race for governor and U.S. Senate. Ramaswamy versus Acton for governor. Husted versus Brown for Senate. Republican and Democratic strategists join me to break down what to expect in these high-profile and highly consequential races. Plus, a highly consequential move in one of the top offices in Ohio government. Attorney General Dave Yost resigns to take a new job with the nonprofit legal organization Alliance Defending Freedom. When the resignation takes effect and what the ripple effects could be. Face the State starts now. Thanks for joining us for Face the State and happy Mother's Day. I'm Doug Petcash. And we start with the resignation of Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost. Governor Mike DeWine made the official announcement just before 4:30 Thursday afternoon. Yost's resignation is effective June 7th. He has served as Attorney General since 2019. In a statement on social media, he said, "I begin a new chapter June 8th as VP of Strategic Research and Innovation at the Alliance Defending Freedom, a nonprofit law firm that's won 18 cases at SCOTUS in the last 15 years. I've been honored to serve Ohio and will continue to fight for freedom." Governor Mike DeWine said he is grateful for Yost's long career in public service and wishes him the best, adding, "Having served as Ohio Attorney General, I know how important this office is and the great work done by its employees. I will give the appointment of someone to serve as Attorney General thoughtful and deliberate consideration." The Alliance Defending Freedom describes itself as a nonprofit legal organization committed to protecting religious freedom, free speech, parental rights, and the sanctity of life. Joining me now are Democratic strategist Morgan Harper and Republican strategist Terry Casey to talk about the significance and implications of Yost's resignation. Well, Terry, as the Republican here today, I'm going to start with you. What do you make of Attorney General Yost's decision to step down?
Well, he's moving on because it was going to happen anyway the early next year, but there won't be a game of musical chairs. The governor, who was Attorney General for 8 years, is going to appoint somebody, probably a female and maybe a cabinet member who's experienced in that office. So the transition will be smooth because he knows it's important, and that's also Dave Yost's interest too, to make sure that the office continues to work out throughout the year, because that office is attorneys for a lot of parts of state government, universities, et cetera. So it'll be a smooth transition. It'll work out well, but the governor's going to get a lot of attention in the next month by everybody lobbying him and saying, here's my choice and here's who you ought to appoint. And the governor will hold these cards very close and smile and say, thank you very much.
I want to talk more about that in a little bit too, but Morgan, I want to get your take on it too. What do you make of the resignation at the timing and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine Attorney General Yost was ready to move on and probably pursue other things. I think you can tell from where he's going that not all of his values aligned with a lot of things that Democrats care about. But I do think, one thing that's going to be an important consideration for Democrats to watch with this appointment is whoever comes next, will they continue some of the economic issues that Dave Yost actually was good on, being a leader in taking on pharmacy benefit manager industry and the healthcare consolidation. There's a very important case right now, Live Nation Ticketmaster. Dave Yost did stay on that as one of the Republican AGs that's decided to continue suing to break up that monopoly despite the federal government settling. And so it'll be interesting to see how the person who takes over this role will continue or to change course on some of those cases.
And before we get more into like the transition, the dominoes, so to speak, Terry, what do you think about the mark that Dave Yost has left in that office?
Well, he obviously was experienced. He liked being a prosecutor, and AG's office is one of the most interesting in state government because you're involved in touching all the different agencies, know what's going on, both at the state level as well as the local level, because he was involved in a lot of the prosecutions of some cases, investigations of police shootings, other kind of things. So AG is a good job to have because it involves doing so much that's very important.
And he's big on the human trafficking efforts as well, fighting those here in Ohio. So Morgan, Terry touched on it too, but how do you see this playing out in terms of who may take over, who the governor may appoint for him? There had been, some people were speculating that it could be Keith Faber who is running for Attorney General. That would be, putting the candidate in the office, but do you think that could happen or not?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with where Terry Casey was going with that.
You combined
Sorry,
the name.
I know, exactly. It does kind of make more sense to have a placeholder in this and not disrupt some of the elections that are coming. But look, I mean, I think it'll be interesting for the Democratic nominee who's going to be taking over, for the general and John
Kulowitz,
Kulowitz to consider how he positions himself against who is in this role. I mean, he already was starting to take on some of this messaging and Jobs Ohio, calling for investigations. And so that will be his current foil, in addition to the person who is the candidate. And so, yeah, we'll see how he handles that.
And back to Governor DeWine's decision making on this. We were watching yesterday when we started hearing about this, when would Yost's resignation take effect? So basically, the governor has a month. How do you see it playing out? A lot of meetings, like you were saying?
Yeah, I mean, probably a lot of things to consider. But I mean, ultimately, I imagine he'll want to move pretty quickly to bring some clarity to both the staff and then also the people of Ohio who will ultimately take over.
So, Terry, do you think he'll take the full month?
Well, of course, you get lots of calls, lots of people telling you what to think and what to do. So it's fun for him, fun for other people, but it'll be a smooth transition because, again, his 8 years as Attorney General, he's got a lot of key people who know the office, who are now in his cabinet or other positions, who are ready to move in there, who understand the complexities of that office.
And I appreciate the two of you. Going to stick around for the next segment as well as we transition back to the primary and then looking ahead to the November election. So coming up next on Face the State, on your mark, get set, go. The race is on for November. We're breaking down the contests and candidates for governor and U.S. Senate and why experts think the Senate race will be super expensive. Welcome back to Face the State. The results of the May 5th primary are still unofficial, but the races are set for the November general election. We'll see two very high-profile contests for governor between Democrat Amy Acton and Republican Vivek Ramaswamy, and for Senate between former Senator Sherrod Brown and Republican incumbent John Husted. In last week's primary, we saw a slight uptick in voter turnout compared to the last two midterm primaries, according to the Secretary of State's office. Here's how it breaks down. In 2018, 21% of Ohio's nearly 8 million registered voters cast a ballot. In 2022, the number was very similar at 20.8%. This year, 22.6%. That's up 122,000 ballots cast from 2022, despite about a 50,000 drop in registered voters. In the primary race for governor, Amy Acton was unopposed and received 760,000 votes. On the Republican side, more than 670,000 voted for Vivek Ramaswamy for 83% of the vote. In the U.S. Senate race, Senator John Husted was uncontested and received more than 730,000 votes. On the Democratic side, Sherrod Brown received more than 700,000 for just under 90% of the vote in his primary. Many experts expect the race between Brown and Husted to be a very expensive race. Political experts tell me this is one of the races targeted by both parties as a key to the balance of power in the U.S. Senate. And the money is already starting to pour in. In fact, it's already well over $100 million. According to the Federal Election Commission, Sherrod Brown raised $10.1 million in the first quarter and has $16.5 million cash on hand. And then on Tuesday, the Senate Majority Political Action Committee announced an initial $40 million television ad reservation for the fall to support Brown's campaign. Senator Husted raised $2.9 million in the first quarter and has $8.2 million cash on hand. Last month, the Senate Leadership Fund PAC announced $79 million to support Husted's campaign. According to Ad Impact, the 2024 Senate race between Brown and Senator Bernie Moreno was the most expensive Senate race on record, with more than $540 million in ad spending. Bowling Green State University political science professor Dr. Nicole Califf-Hughes thinks the Brown v. Husted race could be even more expensive.
Both parties want that seat, and both parties are going to spend a ton of money to try to keep or get that seat. I think you're going to see a lot of party money. You're going to see a lot of outside money. You're going to see a lot of party affiliated groups like super PACs spending a lot of money. And with that, you're going to see a lot of negativity. The risk with negativity and negative campaigning is we know from research that it turns voters off. However, it also works. And so it's this combination of people being both disgusted by the negativity, but also then motivated to turn out. And what becomes really hard for voters is in those advertisements and in that messaging, there's no requirement for accuracy. So it requires voters to have to kind of do the extra legwork to sort through the influx of information that Ohio voters are about to get.
Joining me once again, this time to look ahead to the November election, focusing on the races for governor and U.S. Senate, our Democratic strategist, Morgan Harper, and Republican strategist, Terry Casey. Morgan, we'll start with you on this one. With the Senate race, we expected this matchup. So how do you see it playing out?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a tight race, no doubt. They're both going to have a lot of money that's swirling around. And so it's going to be very important for Sherrod in this race to really capture a lot of the energy that we are seeing in this higher voter turnout that we saw in the primary. Pretty neck and neck, relatively, especially some of
You're talking about the numbers between actual Republican and Democratic voters.
Yeah. I think we are happy as Democrats with the turnout that we saw here. I think it is because we had, especially in Franklin County, some competitive primaries. So making sure we're keeping everyone in the fold and really capturing some of that grassroots energy that was present here. But look, I mean, it's going to be a slog, and so it's going to come down to really having that clear message. And I think there's a clear lane here for Sherrod with just how badly things are going in the country with the affordability crisis, and that John Husted has been complicit based on his support of Donald Trump.
How about for you, Terry? How do you see it playing out?
Well, your expert was correct about the negativity and the confusion, but I think the big issue is turnout, because the Democrat problem historically in Ohio has been, except for 2008 and 12, when Obama was on the ballot and energized younger voters, minority voters, Democrat turnout has been relatively flat in most of those other years. So turnout's the key thing to watch, and all the negativity further depresses it. But I think in the Senate race, the big issue, the interesting juxtaposition, is you've got Sherrod, in a way the outsider, but in reality he's got 3 decades in Congress where his record's going to be protested, and Husted in a way is the new fresh face when a lot of people are tired of what Congress hasn't done in recent years. So that whole who's the challenger, who's got the new ideas will be one of the key issues.
Is he really a fresh face, though? I mean, he's been in Ohio politics for 25 years.
That's Ohio politics, but at the federal level and the federal issues, including the 4 years under Biden when inflation was 20 to 25%, Sherrod was there as a senator, in some ways doing nothing. So you've got an interesting contrast between the two. Who's the outsider? Who's the insider?
And I think negativity can play a couple of ways. I mean, Terry referenced Obama. One of the messages that Obama was writing into office was the Iraq War and opposition to that, and not having a plan and putting young people at risk. We've seen people in Ohio, young soldiers who died because of the Iran war. And so I think being able to really focus on the costs of the Trump agenda in this second term will continue to be something that, while maybe negative, is actually quite energizing from people of all different ages and backgrounds to want to turn out and vote for Sherrod Brown.
And, you know, famously, back in the 90s, Clinton administration, or in his campaign, it's the economy, stupid, right? Is it still that today, Terry?
Absolutely. Pocketbook issues matter, and one of the problems Amy Acton's going to have, she's already endorsed a lot of big spending ideas in terms of K through 12 funding, how she's going to write blank checks to the schools, the cost of daycare, the cost of other programs. And all those things sound nice and everybody likes them, but who's going to pay them? How much in taxes is she going to raise in order to fund her promises?
Let's transition to the governor's race, too. Ramaswamy, on the other hand, is promising to phase out the income tax, roll back property taxes to before the end of the COVID pandemic. And then the question becomes then, how do you pay for that?
Yeah, I mean, I do think economic issues are going to be top of mind for voters in both these races, but especially looking at the governor's race. I think that there is a real opportunity for Amy Acton to have a referendum on how the state has been run. There are a lot of folks in Ohio that are struggling. When we look at something like utilities, which she referenced in her acceptance speech on election night, it's going to be important to be really specific, too, about what you're going to do. Who are these PUCO commissioners? There's a scandal to reference here, and Vivek Ramaswamy has no track record of having done anything to speak out on those things. And it seems like he's much more aligned with a lot of these tech interests that are trying to fuel the data center boom, that are rising electricity prices, than he would do anything to stop it. So I do think there's a lane for her. But yes, it's going to come down to who has the best vision for how they're going to manage the state and really fight back against a lot of the corruption that has defined at least my adult lifetime.
And, you know, Ramaswamy got the endorsements of President Trump and the Ohio GOP very early on in this race. It looked like it would be, you know, just a blowout. Are you anticipating a tight race between
I think
Dr.
once
Amy Acton
things
and
start to
Ramaswamy?
play out, you're going to see the two key factors are what I call M&M, not the candy, but money and message. And clearly Ramaswamy's got a big advantage in money versus Dr. Acton, but also in message, if he can drive home a clear message of where he sees Ohio's future. Because again, governor's different than Senate because governor affects people right here in Ohio in terms of how the roads are operated, the prisons, all the things that are closer to people and what makes it work there. So I think it's going to be a different race between governor. And again, governor's at the top of the ticket and people pay more attention because it's closer to home. It affects everybody in their daily life.
And I do want to touch kind of on the historic nature of this too, because no matter who wins, it's going to be a first in Ohio. There's not going to be a person sitting in the governor's chair who looks like Terry and me. It's going to be perhaps the first elected female or a non-white male. How big of a deal is that?
I think it's a huge opportunity. And again, one of the things that's going to bring a lot of attention to this race, both nationally and in the state. There hasn't been a race for governor in a while where it's been a completely fresh name. And so, I mean, I agree with Terry that, Vivek's going to have access to a lot of money, but that might not necessarily be determinative here. One, I mean, Amy is showing that she's able to raise money too, but get to your point, there's this opportunity to really activate a lot of these constituencies and again, build off of the results that we saw in the primary. For example, in the Don Leonard, Adam Miller race, we saw a real uptick in turnout there. It seems like it was connected to more of a turnout from the Muslim community. Is that something that can be built up and really activated statewide that will be able to drive some higher numbers for the governor's race and ultimately lead to a victory?
What do you see about the historic nature of who the next governor will be?
Well, it's clearly going to be a first, and they're both going to be, so to speak, fresh faces, but that's why they're going to want to dig in and see who's got some answers for the operating things. And also you're going to find out that Ramaswamy at age 40 has got a youth and an energy that's important. So, but it's going to be very different contrast between the Senate race versus the governor. But again, governor's the top of the ticket, and people who celebrate that, well, the party in the out always is going to have an advantage. Mike DeWine got elected in 18 when Trump was president then, and people thought a Republican couldn't win. So again, governor is very different than senator, but again, it all boils down to turnout and who's got the right best message.
And just that one historic note here for Ohio, it was Nancy Hollister from December 31st of 1998 until January 10th of 1999, as she was the only female governor in the state of Ohio when she took over for George Voinovich when he was elected to the Senate. Just wanted to throw that in there. So Amy Acton won't be the first female governor. If she wins, she would be the first elected. But thank you both for your perspective on both Attorney General Yost's decision as well as looking ahead to November. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Always
having me.
appreciate when you come in. Well, coming up next on Face the State, hear from the two candidates for governor on how they want to help Ohioans make ends meet, their plans for tax relief. With soaring gas prices, energy bills, property taxes, childcare, and other expenses, the rising cost of living is sure to be a big topic from now until the November election. 10 TV talked with the candidates for governor, Republican Vivek Ramaswamy and Democrat Amy Acton, about the issues of affordability, taxes, and energy. We start with my exclusive interview with Vivek Ramaswamy on his plans to lower income and property taxes and energy costs.
Now, where I want to go in the long run, and this is going to be over time, is to be competitive not just with Illinois and Michigan, right, neighboring states in the Midwest, but I want to be competitive with Texas, Florida, Tennessee. Think about the states that have gone to zero income tax, and we can get there. We have a clear plan to do it. It's not going to be immediate, but by having a clear plan to get there, a credible plan, that allows businesses to start moving back into the state. And one of my top goals as governor, and I'm confident even by this time next year, we will already have progress in this direction. We're going to be attracting major businesses back to Ohio. Businesses that might have otherwise settled elsewhere, by saying that we're going to be a zero income tax state, that we're cutting red tape, that we're improving permitting timelines. We're going to bring those businesses back. And we've laid this out. We're going to roll back the property taxes to where they were before the end of the pandemic. Pragmatic, common sense, and do it in a way that does not hurt our public schools, does not hurt police or fire, but does roll back a lot of the government overgrowth we've seen in our state. So that's the way I'm going to do it.
How do you make up for the revenue that won't be coming in?
So a couple different ways. Number one is I do want to root out every form of waste, fraud, and abuse that we already see in the state. We're going to be taking a long, hard look at waste, fraud, and abuse in the Medicaid system, in other areas of government funding, where these are people who should not even be getting those funds. You're seeing a lot of reports of it, even in central Ohio. That's something that we have to get serious about. That's number one. Number two is I want to drive economic growth. And that's going to happen over time. It's not going to be immediate and overnight. But we're seeing in other states that have gone to zero income tax the same thing that we're going to see in Ohio. Businesses coming in, that's more revenue that then flows through the sales tax.
How do you help the average Ohioan in their pocketbook when you see the increasing cost of energy, gas, housing?
Absolutely. So we've got to cut red tape and increase the supply of energy. Let's produce more energy in Ohio. The good news is nature has been very kind to our state. We're very rich in natural gas. I want Ohio to be a leader in natural gas production and eventually in nuclear energy. And if we increase the supply of energy, that brings down those electric bills.
And now here's Democratic candidate for governor Amy Acton on her plan to address affordability issues and energy.
Everywhere we go, people are exhausted. They're working harder than they ever have. There's no more breathing room. It just doesn't add up. And they're really ready for change. So we are really responding to what we've heard from Ohioans. 95%, by the way, of the things I hear, none of us would disagree on. They're talking about the cost of healthcare, one of the largest costs. You know, we've met a mom along the way who had $300,000 of medical debt because she had premature twins. She didn't do anything wrong. It's just that, you know, any one of us could face a healthcare emergency that wipes out everything we've worked for. That's why in our budget you see us doing things about eliminating medical debt for pennies on the dollar. That's a value. That's a priority that comes from listening to Ohioans. So the tax breaks that we're putting forward are really just choosing to value people who are working and often fall in that gap. They're doing everything right. They don't qualify for other programs and supports. But this will give them this boost. The researched child tax credit, you know, known widely to be one of the best ways to keep kids out of poverty. And we're expanding an earned income tax credit that the feds do just to make it apply to more people. That is well within our budget if we make the choice of, say, not lowering income taxes. Energy is something that Ohio could lead on. We could be an all of the above energy strategy. We could actually export energy in this state if we led on this topic. Now we go down to the level of data centers. We need data centers. We know AI is coming. We are all using our devices. We know this is the future. But data centers need to work for Ohioans, not the other way around. I highly recommend that we are much more transparent in local communities. I mean, communities need to trust us, and I think we shouldn't be doing this in the dark of night. We need to have conversation. What are the benefits to our community? What don't we like about this? We believe data centers need to bring their own energy. Absolutely, our electric bills are going up. Mine went up $140 this past summer. I noticed it. My husband, an elementary school teacher and a coach, we noticed it go up. We also know that data centers, you know, communities don't really have to give away so many incentives. I think the good companies that want to do this right, you know, don't need that.
The November election is on November 3rd. We will, of course, follow the latest news on the races and the candidates for you here on 10 TV. Thank you for joining me this week for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. I'll see you next Sunday at 11:30. And once again, happy Mother's Day.